But we've got a really hot topic for you, which is perfect for the innovation theatre and the discussion about the convergence of media and technology and the future. So we're going to be talking about OTT and what OTT means for consumers and advertisers now and in the future. Joining me on stage, we have two speakers. Damon Westbury, and I'll be moderating. Damon Westbury is the interim managing director of the European Broadcast Exchange. He has full responsibility for the performance, the operations, the business strategy and the venture at EBX, as it's known, and he reports into the joint venture board, which we'll hear more about in a moment, responsible for growing this tech startup. And Damon has quite a lot of cross-media and international sales experience. He joined EBX from Clear Channel, and before that he worked at Microsoft in many roles, working with global sales teams around the world, global agencies and global sales. So joining Damon and I on stage is Lucia Malstromaro from Adform. This is a new role for Lucia at Adform as VP of Global Agencies. She's joined from King, and before that she also worked at Google and also at eBay. So she has the brand side experience as well as the understanding of how a major DSP can play in this space. So let's kick it off with just to define what we're going to be talking about today. A recent report from eMarketer suggested there's still a lot of confusion in the market when it comes to talking about what OTT is and how to identify it. So if I could just hear from you both, starting with you, Damon, how would you define OTT, over the top?
Thank you very much, Joe. I've had quite a lot of conversations this week, actually, where there's been quite some debate on what it is. I would probably try and describe it as simply as it's content that is delivered by content providers over the internet to reach viewers across their connected devices. From where I sit, there's a bit of a difference in how we look at the OTT space. It's probably worth me calling it out. The first of which is that I think there is very much a sort of pure players side to this, or walled gardens, whatever you want to call them, so the likes of Netflix or whether it be Facebook Watch or Amazon Prime. I represent a number of broadcasters across Europe, so I think we see ourselves as being a bit different to them because our delivery mechanism isn't just on OTT. Over the internet, we have a series of channels as well that are more linear, and OTT is just another channel for us. I think there's also a bit of a difference that with the pure players, I think Joe doesn't like this term, but with the pure players, their content is largely video on demand, whereas also in the broadcast space, our content is video on demand, but can often be live stream as well. And then finally, I'd say that with OTT itself, it obviously, because it's over the internet, it gives a great deal of addressability, so a great level of targeting that isn't available in the linear space.
Okay, so I'm just going to break that down a little bit. So we're talking about television content delivered over the top.
Yeah.
So over the top of the existing cable infrastructure.
Yeah.
That's the bit that I like to identify, which is probably over the internet, over the open internet, rather than through a cable.
Absolutely.
And I'm in agreement with you on a lot of what you said. So I think that it's very often, this includes connected television, which in my opinion is when television is connected to the internet, that is either being plugged into the router or maybe plugged into a streaming device like Amazon Fire or Roku, or maybe plugged in through a device like an Xbox or a Blu-ray, which is how I started watching over the top, or even through a set-top box, but outside the payment infrastructure of cable television. So it's come from quite a US phenomenon, really. And you mentioned targeting and addressability. We'll come to that in a minute, but I just want to check in with you, Lucia. So you bring the brand side, the brand perspective on this. How would you define over the top? Do you see it in the same way?
Well, for everybody, OTT is one acronym, but when you break it down, there are so many little acronyms, whether it's subscription-based, whether it's free, and so on. For us, it's connected TV. That's more how we refer as an umbrella. Our aim is just to make sure that, depending on the strategy of the agency or the advertiser, we are matching to their goals. So it's less about the acronyms, it's less about the overcomplicating TV, in their minds, is TV that they can buy in a more targeted, in a more relevant, connected way. Because we are a stack solution, so we are not just a DSP. For us, it's important also to make sure that this is aligned to their digital buys and how everything goes back in terms of analysis, data, and targeting.
So you're working on over-the-top television, you're working on over-the-top television inside a holistic plan on behalf of the brands. Okay, and can you explain, Damon, we talked about the joint ventures, so you have 5 partners. Can you just give us a bit of an explanation of those 5 partners, how it happened, why it came to be? Because it's fairly new.
For sure, yeah. EBX actually launched in January of last year. That was when the first employee was hired and an office started to be found. And for a long time, there really wasn't a lot more than that. But around about August last year, we had our tech in place and we started to sort of run real campaigns. The partners that really EBX came from are some of the largest broadcasters in the European top 5 markets. So there's TF1, there's ProSieben, there's Mediaset in Spain and Italy, and also Channel 4. So they're the partners that make up our alliance, and really they did this for multiple reasons. Firstly, they're aware that there wasn't really an international sales arm for many of these divisions, an ability to be able to go out there and talk about the content that they had on an international level. But they also realized that if they put their scale together, their audiences together, powered by the very rich first-party data that they have in this video-on-demand space through the sign-up process, that we actually had a very powerful audience, an audience of around about 100 million uniques every month that you can reach, that it obviously then can provide that level of targetability and addressability to what we're doing. So it really was, I think, also an opportunity to build a scale proposition to counter where a lot of money in the video ecosystem is going, really to Facebook and to YouTube.
Okay, so a proper alternative, a scaled international alternative to the walled gardens.
Correct.
But we're talking about broadcaster content, broadcast quality content.
Absolutely.
And then you mentioned that you can add data, targeting, addressability. I think sometimes this whole topic gets included in addressable TV. I think in the US, there's a different understanding of addressable TV. It refers to over-the-top, to VOD content in general, whereas I think in Europe, people mean HBB TV, which is hybrid broadband broadcast television, which is literally where 1 minute you're watching TV and it's delivered over the terrestrial channel, and then it switches to broadband, maybe to give you a targeted advert. So we're not going to cover that. We're going to talk specifically about OTT in this panel. Can you explain a little bit about the data and the targeting and the addressable options that are available with European Broadcaster Exchange, and also the wider availability in Europe?
Yeah, well, I think, first of all, you talk about Europe and the US, and it's an incredibly different market. The sort of technical scale and the audience scale that is in the US is very, very different to the individual tech and many, many platforms that we have in the European market. In terms of the data that we work with, we've got very rich, as I said, first-party data that comes from the sign-up process of people watching this broadcaster content across these OTT channels. And we then merge that data together to kind of create very unified packages to sell to advertisers and agencies. The level of addressability that we can offer is what really I think you'd expect in terms of key demographics, key genres or interests, geolocation, and also sort of device-specific areas. So, clearly some of the sort of campaigns we run, which I think are a little bit more intelligent, might be from a telco who's trying to sort of upgrade somebody onto the next Android handset. They actually start to only focus perhaps on Android users as the next, as scaling that up, or car brands that want to be very relevant to particular geolocations because of where their dealerships are. Okay,
so could you literally run a campaign in just one city, targeting people near the car dealership?
So we have a policy at EBX that we're an international business. If you wanted to buy just one market, you would go to Channel 4 or you would go to ProSieben or TF1. So we work across for campaigns that run in 2 or more markets at a time. But actually right now we have 5 markets internationally If you were an international car brand with dealerships in all of those countries, we could build a package that could target a specific audience interested in specific areas and that lived in particular areas that might be near your dealership. So yes.
Oh, sounds really interesting. So Lucia, let me ask you about data and targeting and addressability. So you actually, at Adform, you have quite a few different options in the suite. Can you explain a bit more about that and what the brands and agencies you work with ask you for in this kind of environment?
So at Adform, for those that are not familiar with us, we are a integrated advertising platform, as we like to refer to ourselves. So it is a full stack solution for advertisers, which include a DSP, ad server, which is relevant to this, a DCO creative solution, as well as a DMP. For us, as you were mentioning, Europe is a much more fragmented market than the US in this space, and there are many technical challenges for broadcasters to bring their inventory, and has been historically, programmatically or at scale.
Yeah.
So, you guys are great news for us in the industry, to be honest, because we represent advertisers and agencies. We work with all holding groups, a very large breadth of advertisers across multiple verticals. So for us, it's a fantastic news to be able to bring more better quality broadcaster inventory programmatically. And as we see the trend shifting more and more, and it's no new news that programmatic is kind of the industry is programmatic first nowadays. 80% of the UK display budgets is bought programmatically. And we see with that video following suit, broadcast inventory following suit, and so on. So when it comes to targeting, when it comes to making sure that you're actually buying the impression that will connect with the user that you want to show your campaign to, that's where we think partnerships like this can really bring a lot of power to it, because you have the right inventory, you have great first-party data. We bring in the advertisers' data with that as well. Yeah. The ability to then use a DSP to connect directly to you and their activity and their strategies on their DMP also, I think adds a lot of value to that.
So you're able to bring the first-party data that the advertisers already own, activated across a potential 100 million, or how about in the US? I know it's a much bigger market in the US with many more households cutting the cord. I think this vernacular around cord cutting and cord shaving and cord nevers, we'll just take a minute to talk about that. It's very much a US phenomenon, in my opinion, because there's a different economics. Within the US, it can be $150 to $250, I nearly said euros a month, for a cable package. So of course, if you can have something like Netflix for $10 a month or similar to that, or even a free package with advertising, it's very appealing because it makes TV more more available, increasing choice, allows more choice for the consumer. So if you compare what we have here, the 100 million that Damon represents, with the opportunities in the US, what's the difference?
Well, the US is a much more mature market in that space, and and technology is a little bit more standard. The players, it's a massive one market, whereas EMEA has so many countries. Each country has their own players. Each player has their own technology. Then there are, policies, legislation. There is a number of uniqueness to each country that has meant that integrations in EMEA takes a little bit more time, and you have to work with many more partners. So when you see, 5 broadcasters coming together, that's fantastic news for the industry, because it means that you have much greater reach at a lower kind of a process cost or operational cost.
Yeah, and I think what's exciting about that is it provides an alternative to the walled gardens.
Yes.
Because at the end of the day, the consumer eyeballs have moved to this way of watching television, driven, I think, by the US, growing in Asia, and then, as you say, in Europe as well. So my personal view is that if broadcasters don't make their inventory available to be viewed online like this, and to be viewed and to have advertising against it, contextually targeted to the actual broadcast content, then it's just a big opportunity for the walled gardens to scoop up a lot of that revenue.
Yeah, I think it's a great opportunity for everybody, right? For agencies as well. There is a convergence coming into play on how agencies plan TV versus addressable TV, how their teams work separately. You see more and more, teams coming together from more of a strategic and tactical approach instead of offline online. In a way. So for brands, that's great news because there is a greater understanding of what the opportunities there are, and it's no longer kind of two different divides.
Do brands understand the opportunity?
I think there is a lot of education that needs to be done, both from a strategic point of view and the opportunities there are. It's not just the ability to buy inventory, which is now a little bit more technically connected, but it is being able to. It's not just marketing to the masses, which TV has always been. It's marketing to the masses in a targeted, connected way. Like you can really tailor the message to each individual. So it's not just doing a subsect of that. You can leverage technology to, DCO type solutions that then targets not just the individual that in terms of who you are, but which message you want them to have, how you want to continue that conversation, impression by impression by impression as well. So there is a lot of power that's coming to this. I asked our internal teams today, and they told me that every single RFP we have received in the last year, no exception, contained questions about OTT. And independent on whether those RFPs came from brand or came from agencies. And also the more often the questions come around when the RFP is from a DSP point of view, but as well as trying to understand what our ad serving capabilities for OTT, which, as you pretty familiar with, there are so many challenges for you in there.
I think there's a lot of opportunity in this space, and there's indeed quite some challenges. I think some of the challenges we have to acknowledge are that there's no single currency right now in that sort of looking at linear and video on demand. There's some great progress in that space from the likes of Project Dovetail, from Barb in the UK, here in Italy, Auditel. I think are making some good headway into that. So there's a definite challenge in that, but I don't think that there's a reason that brands shouldn't do this, because as you said, there's a huge opportunity, and that opportunity is just to reach new audiences or harder to reach audiences, as you were saying, to kind of target them in ways that perhaps they'd never been, that you couldn't target before. And even think about what is the right sort of story to tell across sequential screens as you go from the connected TV through to a tablet and a mobile and build a story like that. I think there's also a lot of opportunity for broadcasters in this space as well, because as a broadcaster, you're able, through the OTT channels, to build a lot of data on what's happening, and that data can be used for personalization of content. It can be used to start to understand when you're really turning off your audience from an ad perspective. And I think there's a great opportunity for consumers as well to get that personalized content, and in our world, the broadcast world, to get free content. We're all being asked every month to sign up to another subscription for X, Y, and Z, and this is content that can be watched on a free of charge basis. We see the big challenge, though, that you just referenced, being the understanding between the difference between broadcast and video. And there's a lot of education that we need to put out in the market right now to all parts of the ecosystem. We find that there are people don't quite understand the quality that is required to show an ad on a big screen TV versus a mobile phone. We find that people don't quite understand how brand safe the environments are and the protections that sit around that brand safety. It might be Ofcom as an example. The other day we had a 5-market campaign for a premium automotive company that we couldn't run in the UK because a dog in the advert didn't have a vet certificate. And so there are quite some education we need to do in this space too.
Wow. Okay.
Well, you're applying TV regulations to this. It's not, just video within the
Absolutely.
internet.
So it sounds like a great opportunity, but if it's an opportunity for brands, an opportunity for consumers, is it an opportunity for traditional television? Do you have a sense of the impact that this is having in traditional television, maybe in Europe?
Yeah, I think that I've heard quite a lot of chat about sort of the end of the TV era, I think, this last couple of days, and I think I personally don't subscribe to that view, because What I think this is doing is giving so much more choice, the ability for so much more programming to be amplified in different ways. Platforms that are investing in a huge way. Look at what Netflix are doing and Prime are doing in certain areas. So ultimately what we're seeing is that there may be some movement in how people consume that content, but actually people are consuming more content both across the linear and the OTT channels. So actually I think it's a rather prime time for TV right now versus a tough time.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think we've never had it so good as a consumer with the variety of television content that we have available, and people still love traditional TV, especially here in Europe, where we have free-to-air TV. We have a tradition of free-to-air TV, and in different markets we have the different models. And of course you get a lot of event-based TV, like Game of Thrones this week, for example. It used to be sport, but last year the World Cup. At my last company, we saw huge watching of the World Cup live over the internet, live OTT, which put technical strains on the company. But obviously, people still want to watch television content, but maybe they want to watch it at the time that they want to watch it, or on a device. Maybe they're out and about, and they want to watch it now, but on their phone on the way home from work or something like that.
I would say there is also a demographic trend in there, because I've worked a lot with CPG brands, and for years on end, the conversation is always about, yes, we can easily get all of these demographics on TV, but what about the other ones? And that's where I think the convergence is coming through. I'm not necessarily that young, but I hardly ever watch open TV. I do have BT at home, but I hardly ever tune into that. But Netflix and Amazon, as you said, are like my first choice.
Oh, well, that's interesting.
For unwinding.
I love television, for the record, and I would like to watch more. But you've brought up there the SVOD players, and in fact, I think this new world is seeing the emergence of new and different kinds of players and different economics. So, with Netflix, people are literally paying a monthly fee to avoid the adverts and get the content that they want. I think it's very content-driven. With Amazon, I believe it's probably more an add-on to an e-commerce model. In the US, in my last job, we saw the emergence of all sorts of different plays, such as Vudu, which was set up by Walmart to show full feature films, and quite a few different emerging technologies. So how do you see the SVOD players? How do they impact on the European Broadcaster Exchange and other broadcasters in Europe?
I think they're absolutely fantastic. They deliver a fantastic experience. I don't think any of us can say that you don't like the experience you get on Netflix, or sometimes the content you get there. I do think, as I said before, people are watching way more content, whether that might be. And I think that as broadcasters, we've got a lot to learn from those companies. In fact, we've already probably learned a lot of it. We've stolen some stuff from them with pride, and probably them from us, in terms of delivering what are the preferences of content you might want to watch, or thinking about how do you sort of satisfy a binge watcher who does want to keep on clicking on the next piece of content. So there's a lot around personalization that I think that those SVOD players have brought to the marketplace. There's a lot of speculation always about Netflix and whether its business model is indeed sustainable going forward, whether the subscription, the price required can fund it. And we've seen the same argument with BritBox and other channels in the UK. I think what we've got to learn is how to get that value exchange really right between the user experience and the advertising, and what is that trade-off that people are prepared to have. And I think the really exciting thing about OTT is that we've got absolutely the ability to do that, and many of my broadcasters are starting to change the duration of ads, are starting to change how many run in a certain sequence, and really starting to innovate in that space with the information they're getting from the OTT channel.
That's really interesting.
With that, I would say those that subscribe to Amazon and Netflix, as an example, don't necessarily always subscribe just not to have ads. It's more for the convenience of it. I can draw a little bit of an analogy from the gaming industry. Before I worked at King, and King makes significant amount of revenue from free to play, and then you buy lives, you buy gold bars and boosters within the game. So it's always free to play, but there is ways that they monetize the games. They have over 200 games. Candy Crush being the most famous one, and Candy Crush itself makes over $1 billion a year. So it's not like King is short of cash. But we built a publisher business within Candy Crush, which was the most premium, protected, environment within the gaming industry in terms of, not wanting any ads there. There was a lot of reluctance from the studios. But what we found is that the players, even if they were paying players, they valued the value exchange the ads brought to them. And at the right frequency, low frequency per day per ads, that actually, what we found in some tests is that we increased the revenue on users that paid small amounts, as well as users that hadn't paid in a while, if they saw an ad. So I do think there is a lot that Netflix and Amazon can play with.
Yeah.
I'm not opposed to ads in those environments. Obviously, low ad load with value to the user.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting to hear that broadcasters are experimenting with the ad load.
Yeah.
And the conversation around the value exchange really echoes what Sam from Generate was saying in the panel before, or the session before this, where it's come to a time when consumers are looking for something different in return for their attention, their eyeballs. So I'm going to come to the audience in a minute for questions, but so please get your questions ready. But first of all, let me ask about creative. So we've talked about different ad loads. How is, Lucia, maybe you could explain, how is the creative being affected in these environments?
From our technology perspective, it depends to which level the agency or the advertiser uses our solution. DSP only, so they come in with the creative already in a tag, or including the ad serving, so they have a lot more flexibility around that. Or if they go all the way into using DCO, which they can truly story tell.
Wait, what's DCO?
Dynamic Creative Optimization Engine. Sorry, acronyms out there. So it's the ability to use technology to customize the creative on the fly. And that could be display, video, mobile, in any screen that you may be using. And the beauty of that is that you can create literally thousands and thousands of iterations and storytell through that, because you have the data and you know what happened before. You set certain rules, if this, do that, and then you pair that with your programmatic activity, and you're not always showing one ad. You're telling a story. It could be that you build videos with a storytelling process which you would use for the TV, and use data to kind of release them gradually as you engage with that user. Or you can use the DCO solution to actually merge pieces of the ad together on the fly based on data that you might have within your solution, within your ad server, within your programmatic DSP, or also using signals from outside. If it's raining, you might be able to customize that creative to kind of tell a story around that. If it is a sports event, you can pull in data feeds from many places, which is standard within programmatic, but within OTT, I think it really can transform the experience that the user has.
Definitely. I mean, I don't think I can add a lot to that, other than to say that we're seeing a lot more campaigns that are thinking actively about where is the first point of interaction. If it's on a big screen, that might be much more of a sort of sit-back experience, a much more sort of beautiful, longer advert, and that the experience on a mobile might be a little bit shorter and briefer, and so maybe more calls to action within the ads. So we're starting to see people use their own intelligence to tailor the creative.
Great, so you can get more and more granular, follow people through the funnel, provided you've got the scale of the audience within the targeting. Yeah. Okay, so questions from the audience. I think we've covered quite a lot of ground here: creative, targeting, data, differences between US and Europe. Do we have any questions from the floor?
Seleni's got one.
Seleni De Silva, can I ask you to give a question?
So, yeah, it's a very good question.
Can you repeat it back for the recording?
Yeah, so the question is, what is the structure of the exchange at EBX? Is it like, and I couldn't quite hear the brand in the US, which is a...
NCC, which is essentially NCC
Yeah, so I think that there's probably a little bit of confusion in the EBX name of where we're at today to where we probably will go. In essence, right now, we are a collaboration from all of those different companies, and the opportunity, the inventory can be bought today on a managed service or a programmatic guaranteed basis. So our inventory doesn't sit there today in an open exchange. That is, I think, clearly the direction of travel of all media. I think that as a business, the broadcasters themselves, and probably rightly so, don't want to fall into some of the errors and the mistakes that have happened in the online space, and particularly in an environment in Europe where there is a very limited supply of this premium brand safe content compared to the heap of it that we spoke about in the US earlier. So right now, I think that as we move towards, perhaps moving towards more of an exchange environment, we'll probably not be working at this on a remnant level, but maybe we'll be looking to think about, well, we know that we've got these travelers that are very high-end business travelers and move from country to country to country. How do we, create that data and that group and allow a very premium bidding experience from the airlines against that particular target, as an example?
It sounds like all of us. So
yeah, everyone here.
Everyone here is the high-traveling premium audience. So we're actually out of time, but we can take one more if you have more.
So right now, and it's a good question. So how are we sharing the data was the question. Lucia spoke earlier about the ability to bring in the traditional in the programmatic space, the advertiser first and match that. Right now, we're working with the broadcaster first-party data that we have. We ourselves are consolidating that in the office to build these custom segments and then packaging those custom segments for the advertisers and agencies. Going forward, clearly we're looking to expand the data partners that we have in this space, bringing in another level of second and third-party data. And actually, directionally, I obviously very clearly want to get to a stage where we can start to match all of that data together in a blind and very GDPR-compliant environment. We're kind of just put the brakes on that right now because I think we're going to see quite some challenges further to what's happening in the ICO and other areas around data. So, we're national broadcasters. Some of them are public, and we have a strong responsibility to audit the data partners we work with, and I think we're just watching this space right now.
So clearly we have to come back next year because it sounds like there's a lot to be done over the following year. So let's come back next year to talk about where the industry is. But thank you very much. Please join me in thanking Lucia and Damon.
Thank you.